Hi, this is Tom Schwab, author of Connect, Grow Your Business as a Podcast Guest. And you're listening to the 360 Entrepreneur with Yann ilunga.
This is episode 68, and today we talk about grow your business by being a great podcast guest. Here we go.
Welcome to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast, the show for entrepreneurs and small business owners who dream big and want to do bigger. Join some of the world's top entrepreneurs, internet marketers, and best-selling authors as they share their inspiring stories, their struggles, and give actionable tips that will help you build, grow, and promote your online business. Here's your host, Yann ilunga.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to this new episode of 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. If it's your first time, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This is an awesome episode. Today we talk about podcasting. We touch again on the topic of podcasting, but this time we talk about the guest. So how you can leverage being a podcast guest to actually grow your business. There are so many great tips here, and we're joined by Tom Schwab, and he's an incredible guest. You're gonna hear is great. He has so many golden nuggets for us. And before we dive into the content, let's take a quick second to celebrate International Podcast Day that is coming up next week.
International Podcast Day is September 30th, and you can help spread the word. International Podcast Day is dedicated to promoting podcasting worldwide. You may be asking, what can I do to get involved? It's pretty simple. First, head over to internationalpodcastday.com and check the suggestions. Second, use hashtag podcastday to join in the conversation. Remember September 30th. Now, let's start the conversation.
All right, so the reference page for this episode with the show notes, with the links to everything Tom and I mentioned is at 360entrepreneur.net/episode 68. All right, here it is. Grow your business by being a great podcast guest with Tom Schwab. Hey everybody, today we talk about podcasting from a different angle. We talked about that a few times. We talked about that in episodes 12 and 27 with Michael O'Neill and John Lee Dumas. But today we talk about podcast guests, how you can be a great podcast guest and how you can actually grow your business by being a great podcast guest. And speaking of being a great guest, we have an incredible guest joining us today. I'm so pumped about what we're going to be talking. He's an expert in inbound marketing, and he helps high potential small businesses sell better than Amazon by using inbound strategies. He's the leader of the e-commerce HubSpot user group. He's been published in various leading industry blogs, and he has been featured as a guest in some of the top industry podcasts, TV shows, and radio shows. And last but certainly not least, is also the author of the upcoming book, Connect, Grow Your Business, Speaking to Your Dream Customers. And that book teaches you how to get booked on your ideal podcasts, connect with listeners, get more traffic, leads, and customers. I'm so excited to welcome on the show Tom Schwab. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Yann, I am thrilled to be here. I love 360 Entrepreneur. I've listened to so many exciting guests here, and anybody that says doing a podcast is easy has either never done it or never done it as well as you. So I appreciate all the work that you put into this art, and I'm excited to talk with you and the audience here.
Great. Well, first of all, Tom, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm happy to know that you got some value out of those episodes, and thank you for your compliments. You know, I'm passionate about podcasting, and you do so many great things, but I've seen that in the last few months, you've been really talking about podcasting, as I said, from the guest perspective. And that's a very interesting and unique angle. It's something that people don't often talk about. We know everything there is to know about setting up a podcast, the equipment, launching this and that, but we don't know much about what makes a great guest. But before we dive into that, and I know you have so many golden nuggets for us, I'm curious, can you tell us more about your new book? Today, the launch date is very close. It's just a couple of days away. So Connect, what can people who are here with you and I, Tom, expect from your new book?
Sure. It's really a summary of what we've learned over our experience, both me personally and working with dozens of clients perfecting this system, and then also testing it with probably another 3 dozen companies. And really, what it is that content is what fuels the online engine, right? Marketing is all about starting that discussion with your ideal customer, your ideal buyer. And what we found is that there's no better way to do that than talking directly to them as on podcasts. Now, you could do that starting your own podcast, and my hat's off to the people that can do that. But there's an easier way. As one customer told us, it's like a swimming pool. You could build your own swimming pool, or you could just get invited to other people's swimming pool.
Right.
And so we teach you the strategy on that. And really, it's a 6-step system. So first you look and say, who do I want to talk to? How do I define this person? Because that's important on your message and where you go. The second step is looking inward and saying, why am I an expert? What do I have to give the host and the audience? Step 3 is going ahead and getting booked on podcasts. And we go through all of that, where to find a podcast, how to connect with the host to present yourself as a professional, even if it's your first podcast. Then we go into what it takes to be a great podcast guest, the do's, the don'ts, the checklists. There's a lot of things that you can do to present yourself very well. And one of the most important parts is connecting them from being a listener to a visitor. And that's really, step 5, where we talk about how can you get somebody to come from just listening to you to coming back to your website to get more things. And at that point, they become a lead. And then ultimately what you want to do is turn them from a lead into a customer. And we've got a bonus chapter in there too at the end. And the amazing part about this whole strategy is that you can outsource everything from the interview. So we've got authors, we've got speakers, we've got coaches, businesses that are using this strategy, and it's taking them roughly a half hour a week to speak to thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of potential customers. So as I look at it, as we go into 2016 here, I can see no better source of traffic and no cheaper source of traffic. We found that traffic from podcasts converts 25 times better than blogs.
Wow. Okay. Interesting stats, Tom. And you just shared so many golden nuggets with us already. And guys, Connect is really a book you have to check out. And you know, Tom, what I really like about what you just told us, that you really stressed the fact that it's not something that it takes, hours or weeks to do, and everybody can do it regardless of the fact they have, if they have done already, 10, 20 different podcast interviews, or if they're just starting out and they want to be on their first podcast. So I really like the fact that you help, entrepreneurs of all levels, so to speak. And we're going to dive more into that. And I know there is a particular person in the online marketing space who you've written a great blog post about and who has been here on the podcast before. Let's leave a bit of suspense and we're going to mention him later on. Before we do that, I'm curious because you've written a post where you talked about how to grow a small business online with your voice and not your keyboard. So, Tom, for all the people who are here with you and I, and there may be small business owners or are about to start an online business, what do you mean by, using your voice rather than your keyboard?
Exactly. And Yann, if we were talking 7 years ago, you and I would be, well, first of all, we may not be on a podcast. And if we were, not nearly as many people would be listening to us. But we'd be talking about blogs and how to communicate with your customer with a blog. Well, the problem there is that it is so saturated right now. And if you write a blog, I can understand what your point you're trying to make, but there's not really a lot of intimacy in it. I don't get to hear your voice. I don't get to hear your inflections. It's very scripted. So for the longest time, we were doing content marketing, and content is what drives our online businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be blogs, infographics, videos, anything. But you look at it and the written word is getting so saturated out there. And you think about how many blogs there are out there and how many you actually read, word for word, not skimming. But podcasts, when you talk to somebody via podcast, you're right in their ears.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a much better conversation with them. They get to know, like, and trust you. And they either connect with you and want to take the next step, or they look and say, well, that was interesting, and I'm going to go on to the next one. And that's fine, because you don't want to attract everybody.
Right.
You just want to attract people that you can delight. So as I look at that, when we did content, and we always tell our customers that doing a blog works, and there's no doubt of that. But make sure that you know that you've got to blog twice a week in order to get traction. And it's probably going to take you 6 to 9 months to really start to get some traction with that. And what we've seen with podcasts is you get traction from your first episode. And it doesn't have to be, a huge audience. As long as you can connect with a small audience that has your ideal customer in it, you'll see traffic, leads, and customers very, very quickly. I used to say that you could do it in 90 days, and I must have great students, because people are coming back now in 30 days and going,
Wow.
wow, it really works. I'm seeing not only the traffic, but I'm seeing leads and customers. And I think, to your point, it's a system. And my background is an engineer. I went to school for. My first job was running nuclear power plants in the U.S. Navy. And I always look at that and say that running a small business can be harder than running a nuclear power plant, because there's no instruction manual with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we really try to do is give you a step-by-step instruction manual that, do step A, step B, use the checklist, because then it becomes very reproducible. And we've tested different things to see what works the best. So from that standpoint, it's a system. And if you follow every step of the system, you should get the results that others have seen.
Yeah, and a good thing, or like an interesting thing that I want to emphasize that you just said, you talked about the difference between our readers or listeners' experience with our content. So the way a reader may interact with our blog post, and a podcast and a listener to our podcast with our podcast. And it's interesting because, for example, it happened to me that a few people told me that, I usually listen to your podcast in bunches. So I may be going on a 4-hour road trip, and instead of listening to music on the radio, I will just play a few episodes of your podcast and that's pretty interesting, because it means that they virtually spend 3, 4, 5 hours with me, listening to me and my guests, getting to know more about me, about my personality, about what I have to offer, and same for my guests. But on the other hand, I don't think, and I'm sure you and I, Tom, can vouch for this. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I've spent like 3 or 4 hours reading a single blog. I think it's never happened.
I skim the blogs.
Right.
And you're right. For an ideal customer to spend 4 hours with you, one of the analogies I use is that if I told you that there was a room with 10 ideal customers in it, would you give me a half hour to go, and sit down with those customers? And everybody says, oh yeah, I would definitely do that. And I said, well, if I told you there was 1,000, would you drive tomorrow to meet with them? And they're like, yeah. I said, what if I told you there were 10,000? Would you fly to see Yann in Finland to address 10,000 customers, ideal customers? And people go, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, save the plane fare, because you can talk to those people on a podcast, and you can do it from home, or work, or really any place you've got an internet connection.
Yeah, no, you're right. And actually, I'm curious, Tom, because we've been talking about podcasts, and most podcasts are audio only. So like in this case, but I know that I now has been over a month and a half since I launched a YouTube channel where I create 3 videos every week. And, I know that video is very powerful, but, some people may be wondering, like, Is it better to go for video podcasts or audio podcasts, or what is your take on this? I'm curious.
I always defer to the experts. Mm-hmm. And the experts is not you or me or a consultant. The expert is our customers.
Right.
So if you do a video podcast and an audio podcast and they like one more than the other, then they're voting. They're telling you what they want. Mm-hmm. In my mind, it's so easy to repurpose content, mm-hmm. and especially audio or video. So I love what Gary Vaynerchuk is doing now. Right. He's got a video version of it, and he takes the audio off that and makes a podcast. A lot of times we'll transcribe our audio interviews and make blog posts out of them. It's the easiest blog post you'll ever make. Mm-hmm. So that way it allows people to consume the content, to connect with you whichever way they want. And one of the magic things about audio is that as you're driving along with that person for 4 hours and they're listening and you're listening to them talk, there's all kinds of great reasons that they can send you back to their website. Mm-hmm. So if we're on a video, I can show you a chart and explain something. But if we're on audio, I can say, well, if you want the infographic that goes along with the 6 steps of the Connect strategy, we'll just go to the website and, you can find it there. Mm-hmm. Or if there's a checklist, all of those reasons that you can point to in your podcast interview just gives a reason for somebody to go from being a listener to a visitor. So I think that's part of the reason podcasts are magic from a marketer standpoint or a business standpoint. But from a listener standpoint, I think that it's so much easier to multitask
right.
while you're listening. I can't watch a video while I'm driving. I can't watch a video while I'm jogging outside. Well, at least I shouldn't. But with audio, you can do it so many times.
Yeah. No, you're right. And we've talked or you touched on some of the things you discuss in Connect, and you told us about the case studies about your clients. You told us why we should focus on using our voice rather than our keyboard, or not, in addition to our keyboard. And I'm curious because I know that, you have been a guest on podcasts, and you've told us that you're also a podcast listener. And I'm sure you have some insight on this. Why do you think many podcast guests don't get results?
I think because they don't set their goals clearly at the beginning. Mm-hmm. With anything, you have to define what success is from the very beginning. Because if you don't set a clear target, you'll never hit it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the first few times that I was a guest on a podcast, my goal was more of a vanity thing, mm-hmm. where people a lot of times will go on and say, wow, Yann invited me to his show. I am thrilled by that. I just want to talk with him and have a great interview. Mm-hmm. And I look at that as more like a firework. It goes up, it makes a flash, and then it disappears. Right. You've got to have a system there. And so early on, defining what that means and having a goal of saying, I want to be on X number of podcasts a month. Maybe it's 2 podcasts a month. And with that, I want to get, maybe it's 200 people back to my website from those podcasts. And that's very doable. And one of the things we teach is that you should never just send them back to your website. Always make them feel welcome. So mm-hmm. if anybody wants to see anything that we're talking about here today, you can just go to tmschwab.com/360. Mm-hmm. And everything Yann and I talk about will be there. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One, I can now track where my different traffic is coming from. Mm-hmm. So I can see what podcasts or what type of podcasts are converting the best. But the other thing from a user's experience or listener's experience is that if someone listens to this the day it posts, I want to make sure that they get everything they're looking for, everything we talked about. And podcasts are evergreen. So there's going to be people that are listening to this in 2017, 2018. Right. And when they come back to the website in 2 years, I know my front page is going to change, but I don't want them to not get what they wanted. So really, it's not a landing page. It's not a squeeze page. It's a welcome page, welcoming from the podcast there. So that's a way to do it. And then the other thing is setting a goal of how many leads you want. So if there's 200 visitors that come to your site, well, make sure that you offer them something on your site that has value. And you can look at that, and really a lead is when somebody says, hey, here's my email address. Please, give me that free ebook, the download, the checklist, whatever it is. And it's so important because until that point, they're the listener, they're not your lead. Because once you've got them, their email address, now you can really start serving them. You can give them more helpful information. And going back to Gary Vaynerchuk, he talks about that book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. I always look at that as serve, 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 ask. And it's so easy to be helpful. And if you can do that through your email nurturing, all of a sudden you don't have to really ask. People are just saying, hey, how can I solve my problem with your product?
No, this conversation with you, Tom, has been sensational. Like, you're sharing so much value with us. You mentioned the page where you guys can find everything Tom and I have covered. You can find it there at tmschwab.com/360, or simply could go to the show note page of this episode, and you're going to find that link there. And make sure to give Tom a huge shout out on Twitter. Make sure to connect with him. You can find him at tmschwab, and it's spelled TMSCHWAB. So at tmschwab. Make sure to connect with him there. Give him a shout out and let him know that you're listening to him and I here on the show. So it's about having a strategy, Tom. You told us having some goals in mind and kind of create a sort of funnel in a way. So welcoming the listeners and, turning those listeners into visitors, and then turning those visitors into customers. And in more practical terms, if there is, someone who is here with you and I and is really getting inspired by what you are saying, what steps can they take to become a great podcast guest?
Yeah, the first thing is realize why you're there. If you want to be a great podcast guest, you're there to add value to the host and to the audience. Your number one goal of being on a podcast is not to make yourself look great. It's to make the host look great. You want to make the host look like he is a genius for inviting you onto it. It's not a time to pitch and everything like that. So there are great resources back on our site. We've got different interviews we've done, different resources. We do an online training, and I know you and I had talked about doing one here. So I'll just tease that a little bit. So there's all kinds of great ways that you can do this. And your point was well made, Yann, is that it's a strategy. And if you follow the steps in it, it's reproducible. It works. And the great thing too is that you don't have to learn by mistake. We've got people that are using this that are doing crowdfunding, coaches, speakers, authors, manufacturers. So it really works with any business that's trying to talk to their customers. And it's really, as podcasting expands, it's no longer podcasting, it's on-demand radio. In 2016, there's a lot of cars in the U.S. that will come with the ability to download podcasts. And I just see this opportunity expanding. I think it's something that everybody will be doing, say, in 2 years from now. But right now, it's a new strategy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you mentioned that you have quite many resources on your site, and one of those is the post about the person, the mystery man, Mr. X. I teased a little bit at the beginning, and he's Pat Flynn. So he's someone who was here on the podcast. Is someone who I mentioned a few times, throughout this podcast, because he's someone I really look up to. And the way I kind of got to know about Pat, it was through what you told us earlier. It wasn't on his site. It wasn't on his podcast. It was on another podcast. I heard about him. I was really, interested. I was like, oh, okay, it sounds very interesting what this guy is talking about. And, I say this guy on purpose just to give the listeners here an idea that I didn't know who he was. His name didn't ring any bell. I just checked his blog out, and, from there I became a big fan. So, Tom, why do you think Pat is a good example to follow when it comes to being a great podcast guest? And there is I know you have a few points there, and guys, I said earlier, you find the show notes, with everything Tom and I have talked about, including the link to this post. And Tom, there is a point there in that post. I think it was the first one, and has to do with Pat taking a selfie. So make sure to mention that as well.
Well, I too had listened to Pat on somebody else's podcast, and he's got, last year in Podcast Movement, he was named the number one podcaster. And his average podcast gets downloaded by 350,000 people. Now that sounds huge, but you figure out how many people there are in the world, and only 350,000 listen to him. So even being number one, there's so many people that don't know who he is. So he intentionally goes on other shows and other opportunities, really to expose himself to other audiences. And he provides a great service. And I love that he got number one, because I know he is the nicest guy in all of podcasting. And what really struck me is that at Podcast Movement, I saw him there before it started, and Pat was just standing there with his iPhone, and I wasn't sure what he was doing, if he was taking a selfie or what. But I came up to him and put my hand out and said, hi, Pat, my name's Tom Schwab. With that, he turns the phone to me and he says, Tom, I'm doing a Periscope. This is great. Introduce yourself to the audience. And he made the other person a star. And, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of people that he was talking to, and that I probably interrupted him, but he didn't look at it that way. He looked at it as, how can I connect people? And he is so humble. He is so friendly. He is so unassuming. He's the nicest guy in podcasting. And, today, they say your net worth is proportional to your network, and your network has nothing to do with how many people follow you on Twitter. Right. It has nothing to do with how many likes you get on a post. It's really those people that know you, like you, trust you, and care about you. And Pat has built this entire tribe just by talking to people. And even if you've got a podcast, I think you should look at being a podcast guest. If you look at major celebrities out there with major platforms, they're still going to other people's shows to be heard. Mark Maron is a great example there. He's got a podcast, and President Obama was on his podcast. Now, you look and say, why would the President of the United States go on a podcast that maybe has, 200,000 downloads per episode? I mean, he can get on national television and speak to everybody. But the truth is, he doesn't, because Mark's audience is totally different than the national news. So with that, he was able to go and talk directly to that niche audience. And that's one of the things I love about podcasts, is that the audiences are small, they're very focused, they're engaged, and they're very niche. I tell the story also of one of our clients has been on over 100 podcasts, and he focuses on coaching men, business owners. And my wife one time said, hey, is he still doing podcasts? And I'm like, yeah, he's been on over 100. And she's like, well, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I've never heard him. And I'm like, well, that proves the strategy works, because he's not going out and talking on the marathoning podcast that she's on, the mom podcast that she listens to. He's focusing on his audience. And so there's a podcast for everybody. There's a podcast right now that your customers are listening to. The only question is, are they listening to you or somebody else?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Tom, that each and every one of you guys who's here with Tom and I should ask themselves. And, in case Tom and I have mentioned Pat Flynn, because now we know him pretty well. In case you don't know anything about Pat, once you're finished with this interview, I definitely recommend you check out episode 14, where I welcomed Pat, and he's a very, very nice guy. And as you said, Tommy, really think about ways he can help others. He can make the other person a star. And yeah, really, if you don't know who Pat Flynn is, listen to episode 14. You're gonna start to love the guy. He's a great guy, and Tom is a great guy. And really, I can't stress this enough. He has been sharing so much value. Tom, you have really provided us with so much food for thought, so many great golden nuggets, many tips. And, more of that is in your book, Connect. And guys, you can find him obviously on Tom's website. You will find also the link in the show notes as soon as the book is launched. And Tom, you told us you met Pat at Podcast Movement. You were there in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's interesting because you told us, even though you aren't necessarily a podcaster yourself, you still went because you're still passionate about podcasting, and you recognize the importance of podcasting and the power of podcasting. So I just wanted to ask you if you have, some takeaways from Podcast Movement. What have you learned from that experience at the conference?
Yeah, there was a few things that really struck me. One is how the level of the art is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasts used to be 5 or 6 years ago where somebody just spoke into their computer on their laptop and uploaded it right there. Well, those days are gone, and the quality of the art is increasing, and the value, and that's wonderful because that will draw more listeners into it.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was that you assume, if you listen to podcasts, you assume that everyone else does. But the stats showed that only 20% of the U.S. actually listens to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a huge potential for that. And as it becomes easier and easier to access these, that market is just going to explode. And the third thing was, I think we're going to see a shift of markets.
Mm-hmm.
I went there expecting that I was going to be the only person of the 1,100 that didn't have a podcast. And I ran into other people that didn't have podcasts, notably a lot of people from the terrestrial radio, the
Mm-hmm.
AM and FM stations, that realized that people are gravitating towards this content, that they don't want a show that is produced for millions and millions of people. They want a show that is produced for a small niche.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw that even the big AM and FM stations were there trying to figure out how to use podcasting, I realized that we're on the cusp of this. This was the second year of Podcast Movement. And I think the first year they had 400 or 500 people there. This year they had 1,100. Next year in 2016, it's going to be in Chicago. So I think we're going to look back on this as the infancy of podcasting. As I mentioned, that I think the idea of being a guest on a podcast is going to be as common as being a guest on a television show or a major radio show in years to come. So the people that get into it now, both as hosts and as guests, really will be the early adapters and will get rewarded for that.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing those with us. And Tom, before I wrap up this episode, you have been a great guest, a great speaker, and I know that you also speak at conferences. I know you're gonna be in October. You're gonna be at Entrepalooza on October 22nd, 23rd in Santa Barbara, California. So in case there is someone who's actually listening to you and I and is gonna be attending Entrepalooza, can you just give us a sneak peek of what you're gonna be talking about there?
Sure. At Entrepalooza in Santa Barbara, California, I'm going to be talking about user-generated content. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, content is what drives our online engines. And we as an individual can't produce as nearly as much content as our audience can. So how can you use that user-generated content? How can you have your tribe or your audience sharing that with you? How can you get more of it, and how can you leverage it? So we're going to go through that, and then we've got 10 best examples that we're going to we're going to put out there that everybody can copy in their own business. And even if you can't make the conference, definitely follow me, because I'll be tweeting out the slides and putting that on slide deck. And I'm sure somebody's going to be periscoping it live too. So we live in a wonderful world.
Yeah, no, and it's great that you mentioned to follow you. So guys, again, you can find Tom, obviously, all his social media. You find him on his website, tmschwab.com, or simply follow him on Twitter at tmschwab. And Tom, we're gonna be doing something fun next month. So we are approaching the end of September, and over the next few weeks, we're gonna be doing something very, very interesting that really builds on what we've been talking here about. So would you like to tell all the people who are here with you and I what we're gonna be doing?
Well, I think I let the cat out of the bag there earlier when I teased it a little bit too much. But yeah, it's one thing to talk about the system and how you can take people from being listeners to visitors to leads to customers. But to actually see the system is so much more helpful. So Yann and I are going to do a 30-minute training, and we're going to go through the entire 6-step system and show you how it works, why it works, give you a really behind-the-scenes view of how you can do it also. So that's a training that he and I are going to do together, and I'm excited. Anytime I get to spend more time with Yann is a good investment of time for me.
Awesome. The feeling is mutual, Tom, and I can't wait. And the best way to keep yourself updated with the exact date, the exact time, and the topics, the specific points, you can go to the page, to the show notes page of this episode, and you find there all the links of the things Tom and I have covered, and you're going to find also the link with all the information you need. So if you've enjoyed this conversation with Tom, if you want to really take action, you want to build authority, you want to grow your business, you want to get more traffic, leads, and customers by being a great podcast guest, you have to do 2 things. The first one is make sure to grab a copy of Tom's new book, Connect. And the second one, make sure to sign up for this free training where you're gonna see everything in action. So you actually gonna see it. And Tom, to wrap up this awesome conversation, I'd like to ask you for some final words of inspiration, some final golden nuggets. So if people who have been here with you and I, they really want to get started, what do you think are the first steps they should take in order to be or become great podcast guests?
I think the biggest struggle most people deal with is not valuing what they have to say. They look at it and say, well, I'm not sure if I'm an expert. Well, you've got something to share. Mm-hmm. You've got something to say. And one of the quotes I always love is from Derek Sivers. And Derek is the founder of CD Baby, which is the precursor to iTunes. And he says, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. So you know things, you've got experiences, you've got things that you can share. And now you have a medium to share them. Not just a blog that nobody will ever read, but you've got an avenue to go on podcasts and share the knowledge, the wisdom that you have. And so I would say just the self-confidence of knowing that you have something that the world needs. Now, take the first step and listen to podcasts, listen to ones that your customers are listening to, mm-hmm. and have the courage to go out there to the host and say, I have something that I think it would be of interest to you and your guests. Your first interview will be your worst interview, but it won't be your last. So with that, go out there, share what you have. And I think you'll be blessed for it. You'll be amazed at the feedback you'll get and visitors and comments and leads, and ultimately growing your business. Like I said before, more and more people are listening to podcasts. Your customers are listening to podcasts. They're going to be listening to somebody, and it's either going to be you or your competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are great, inspiring words to wrap up this conversation. And as you said, you learn by doing. So as you said, your first interview is going to be your worst, but it's not going to be your last. And podcasters are very friendly people, right, Tom?
Very, very much so. And, the host will walk you through it. They want you to win as much as you want. And that's one of the things I love about podcasting. It's so much different than radio or television. If right now you call your local radio station and say, hey, I would like to be interviewed about my new book, Connect, they'll have the salesman call you back and say, well, if you would like to buy some advertising time, we'll put you on there. But podcasters are different. Yann wants to have a great interview here. He wants to share great content. So don't be intimidated. And one of the things that for a lot of people, if I told you that tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. you're talking to 10,000 people, they wouldn't sleep that night. Right. But if it was, hey, tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. you get to have a conversation with Yann, you'd say, that's great. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same thing, talking to thousands and thousands of people. So, if you're intimidated as public speaking, it's a great way to go. Just have the confidence to go out there. The first one is the toughest. And after that, they just get more and more fun.
Right. All right, Tom, I want to thank you so much for being here with us and sharing so much value on how to be a great podcast guest and for being an awesome podcast guest yourself. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Yann. I look forward to seeing everybody at the training.
All right, everybody, we are back. Tom, thank you so much, first and foremost, for being a great guest. I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I'm sure it's going to be one of the most popular episodes. And thank you for all your golden nuggets on how to grow a business by being a great podcast guest. And you heard it, guys. Tom and I are preparing something great for you. Make sure to check out the reference page of this episode at 360entrepreneur.net/episode 68, where you get the links to everything Tom and I are talked about. And there are going to be also the information on the upcoming webinar we are going to have sometime in October. To wrap up this episode, I want to spend a moment to talk about International Podcast Day. It's going to be on September 30th, and I'm so excited because I've been asked to be a speaker. So at 9 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to be doing a blab where I talk about how to grow authority through a podcast. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe you already have a podcast and you would like to learn some tips on how you can leverage your show to build and grow authority and get exposure, that's definitely for you. And other speakers for International Podcast Days are John Lee Dumas and Kate Erickson of Entrepreneur on Fire. We got Ray Ortega from the Podcast Roundtable. We have Michael and Isabella Russell from the UK. You may remember Isabella was here with us. We have speakers from quite many different countries. It's going to be exciting. If you want to learn more about that, again, you find the link to that and everything else in the show note page at 360entrepreneur.net/episode 68. I'll be back with you next week with 2 new exciting episodes of the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast, plus my blab session on International Podcast Day, September 30th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. All right. Thank you so much for taking time off your day, for joining Tom and I for this fantastic new episode of the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. I wish you an awesome weekend and make sure to come back next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. For more tips and tools, head over to www.360entrepreneur.net.